Hello mga kawawmat, in this video lesson, we'll discuss identifying appropriate test statistics involving population mean. So first, let's have a short activity. So write the letter C if the statement is characteristic of standard normal distribution, and T if the given characteristics describe T distribution. So on the previous topic, no, on the third quarter natin, so say the normal distribution and the T distribution is already uh, discussed. So recall lang to. So number one, it is best applied if you have a limited sample size. So your n is less than 30 as long as the variables are approximately normally distributed. For number two, it is also applicable if you do not know the population standard deviation or your population variance is unknown. Number three, this is the best to use in a statistical test for if the population standard deviation is known. Number four, it is always used for normal distribution. And number five, this test is often applied in large samples. So your n is greater than 30. So for number one, since that is limited sample size, so what do you think? Okay, so that is, we're going to use T distribution. So, letter T ang sagot natin. How about number 2? Since the population variance or the population standard deviation is unknown, so therefore, T distribution also. Number 3, since the population standard deviation is known, okay, so we're going to use the normal distribution. How about number 4? Normal distribution also, the standard normal distribution. And number 5, since our n is greater than 30, so normal distribution then. Next, so another activity. So, in this video lesson kasi, kailangan alam natin kung paano kunin yung mga given value para ma-identify natin kung anong test statistics yung gagamitin natin. So, kasi in hypothesis testing, meron lang tayong dalawang gagamitin, the t-test and the c-test. So, alin sa dalawa ang gagamitin kapag ganito yung problem, kapag ganito yung given. So, kailangan mapamiliarize tayo kung paano kinukuha yung mga given sa problems. So, determine the needed data for its given problem. So, for example, a grade 11 researcher reported that the average allowance of senior high school students was more than 80 pesos. A sample of 35 students had mean allowance of 100 pesos at alpha level of 0.01 tests. It was the claim that the students had allowance of more than 80 pesos. The standard deviation of the population is 40 pesos. So based on the problem, so ano yung mga given, no? Yung mga given data dito sa problem ito. So, i-determine natin kung ano yung population mean natin, the sample mean, sample size, and the population standard deviation. So, based sa problem, ano yung population mean natin? Okay, since nakalagay dito sa unang sentence, that the average allowance of senior high school students was more than 80 pesos. So, ibig sabihin, yung 80 pesos, that is the population mean. So, and then class, take note yung mga symbol na ginagamit natin. For population mean, ginagamitin natin yung mu or this symbol. And for sample mean, since nakalagay dito class that a sample of 35 students had mean allowance of 100. Okay. So, ibig sabihin, yung sample mean natin is 100. So, ito naman yung symbol na ginagamit natin for sample mean. And the sample size is a sample of 35 students. So, the sample size is 35. So, nire-represent naman natin yung sample size sa n, no? Small letter n. And the population standard deviation is 40. Kasi nakalagay naman dito, the standard deviation of the population is 40. So, mahalaga na marunong tayo, no, mag-determine ng mga given data para madali rin natin ma-identify kung t-test or c-test yung gagamitin natin kapag na sa testing hypothesis natin. Okay? So, next. Another example. According to a cell phone company, the average price of cellular phone in the Philippines is 12,999 pesos. However, in a sample of 20 customers randomly asked about the price of their cellular phone, data collected shows an average of 9,999 and standard deviation of 7,999 pesos. Using the alpha level of 0.05 of significance, so is there enough evidence proving that the average price of cellular phone is less than 12,999? So based on the problem, what are the given data? So the population mean is what? 12,999. So nasa first sentence siya. And then, how about the sample mean? So ano yung sample mean natin? Since nakalagay naman dito, however, sample of 20 customers, so dito pa lang, alam mo na yung sample size nyo, and then nakalagay dito that their cellular phone data collected shows an average. So, yan ang yung clue natin kapag kinukuha natin yung population mean and sample mean. 9,999. And then the sample or this is the sample size. Okay, so hindi natin napalitan. So the sample size is 20. And since hindi siya, wala dito yung population standard deviation natin, pero given ang sample standard deviation natin, and that is 7,999. So walang given dito na walang population standard deviation. So kapag sample standard deviation, S naman, small letter S yung nilalagay natin as symbol. So let's try. So number 1, the average number of ad clicks per day for Facebook before was 192,000 and the standard deviation was 100,000. 64 days after the redesign, the mean number of ad clicks per day was 200,000. So what are the given data on the in this example? So what are the given data? So the answer is, okay, so you can check your own answer, para masundan. Pwede nyo yung sabayan. Another example. Okay, so the answer is, so the population mean is 1,500, the sample mean is 1,300, the sample size is 55, and then the sample standard deviation is, the sample standard deviation is 25. Okay, so I think na-recall nyo na kung paano tayo nagde-determine ng given data sa problem. So itong yung skills na yan ay gagamitin natin para mas madali natin ma-identify kung t-test or c-test ba ang gagamitin natin. Okay, meron pa palang isa. So another. Okay, so the population mean is 5, the sample mean is 6, and the sample size is 26, and the population standard deviation is 1.2. Okay, so definition of terms. So ito ay mga na-discuss na sa mga previous topics, pero i-recall na lang natin kasi ito ay ma-encounter din natin sa topic na to. So recall lang natin. So when you say population, it includes all the elements from a set of data. Sample, it consists of one or more observation from the population. Sample mean, that is, it consists of one or more observation from the population. And then for population mean, that is the mean of all values in the population. So I think, so again, the sample mean is the mean of the sample. values collected, and the population mean is the mean of all values in the population. If the sample is randomly selected and sample size is large, then the sample mean would be a good estimate of the population mean. So when say population standard deviation is a parameter which a measure of variability with fixed value calculated from every individual in the population. And always remember yung mga symbol na ginagamit natin, class. The sample standard deviation is a statistic, which means that this measure of variability is calculated from only some of the individuals in a population. And last, the population variance. So, in the same sense, indicates how the population data points are spread out. It is the average of the distances from each data point in the populations to the means squared. So, since we already defined the important things in identifying the test statistics in hypothesis testing, let us now determine this concept. So, from the activity, no? From the activity in the previous slide, so balikan natin yung unang question, yung i-determine natin yung given data. So from that example, no, a grade 11 researcher reported that the average allowance of senior high school students was more than 80 pesos. A sample of 35 students had mean allowance of 100 pesos. At alpha level test, it was the claim that the students had allowance of more than 80 pesos. So the standard deviation of the population. So here, from the statement, so yung 80 pesos natin, that is the population mean, no? That is the population mean. So that is the average allowance of the population of the senior high school student. And then yung 35 is the sample size. Okay, that is the sample size or the number of students taken from all senior high school student. The sample mean is 100. So 100 yung sample mean natin. That is the mean allowance of the sample. And the population standard deviation is 50 pesos. So that's the standard deviation of the population. So now, so since you already know how to get the data needed in choosing test statistics, so this time you will determine that test statistics is appropriate in computing test value in the hypothesis testing. So let's define first what is test statistics. So a test statistics is a random variable that is calculated from sample data and used in hypothesis tests. So you can use test statistics to determine whether to reject or accept the null hypothesis. So the test statistics compare your data with what is expected under the null hypothesis. So to identify the test statistics, you must consider whether the population standard deviation variance is known or unknown. So, use C-test if the population standard deviation is known. So, tatandaan, kapag sa problem, kapag yung population standard deviation is given, and then kapag yung sample size natin, the population is normally distributed, a C-score is calculated with population parameter, and it is used to validate a hypothesis that the sample rows belong to the sample population. At lagi natin tandaan, no, the sample size is large or your N. So, kino-consider natin na yung N natin kapag greater than or equal to 30, so large sample size na yan. Okay? So, gagamitin natin yung C-test natin kapag yung population standard deviation natin is given. And then, T-test naman, a t-test is used when the population variance or standard deviation are not known. So, ibig sabihin, hindi siya given. The population is normal or nearly normally distributed, and the sample size is less than 30. So, yan ang pagkakaiba ng C-test and T-test. So, paano natin siya gagamitin? Next is, meron tayong central limit theorem. So, in central limit theorem, if the population is normally distributed, or the sample size is large and the true population mean, so then your normal distribution yung gagamitin natin, no? Has a standard normal distribution. When the sample size is extremely large and the variance is unknown, so using the central limit theorem, ang gagamitin pa rin natin is standard normal distribution. So the sample standard deviation may use as an estimate of the population standard deviation when the value of your population standard deviation is unknown. So tatandaan natin, actually class, no, yung central limit theorem naman talaga ay kaya C-test lang ang ginagamit natin kasi yung t-test na table, pag tiningnan natin kasi yung t-test na table, very ano siya, no, hindi nakalagay lahat, parang ano to, anong tawag natin dyan, konti lang, ang hirap kunin ng area. Pero sa say table kasi, doon sa standard normal distribution natin, madali natin kunin, parang hindi siya limited. Pero ngayon kasi, kahit i-search nyo sa mga browser nyo, pwede mo nang makuha yung area, no, kahit gaano pa kalaki yung sample size, no, pero since nasanay tayo na say normal distribution, yung standard normal distribution yung ginagamit natin. When sample size are small, the central limit theorem does not apply. So, yan sabi, you must then impose stricter assumption on the population to give statistical validity to the test procedure. So one common assumption is that the population from which the sample is taken has a normal probability distribution to begin with. So under circumstances, if the population standard deviation is known, you're going to use the standard normal distribution. But now nga, sabi ko nga, ngayon, ang dami na. So, ang dami nyo nang pwedeng gamitin. Dahil marami tayong mga apps na makukompute na natin na kung saan pwede natin gamitin yung t-test with a very large sample size. No? Hindi na siya problema ngayon. Kung dati c-test lang lagi ang ginagamit. But this time, maraming app and then maraming free, no, pre-app na pwede nyo gamitin, na pwede natin gamitin yung t-test with a very large sample size. So, to sum up, para hindi kayo malito kung paano natin i-identify kung c-test ba or t-test ang gagamitin natin given the problem. So, tatandaan lang natin, kapag yung sample size natin ay greater than or equal to 30 and then the population standard deviation is known, so c-test ang gagamitin. Kapag yung sample size natin is greater than or equal to 30 and the population standard deviation is not known, so hindi siya binigay, pero yung sample size naman natin is very large according to the central limit theorem, so z-test pa rin ang gagamitin. And also, if your n is less than 30, meaning your sample size is less than 30, pero yung population standard deviation is known, given, so c-test pa rin yung gagamitin natin. And then, t-test ang gagamitin nyo kapag less than 30 ang sample size and the population standard deviation is not given or not known. And then, less than 30 yung sample size kapag yung sample standard deviation naman ay given. So, tatandaan, no? Kapag ang sample size natin is less than 30 and the sample standard deviation is given, so t-test ang gagamitin. So, tatandaan ito dahil ito yung pinaka-summary para ma-identify natin kung c-test or t-test ang gagamitin natin. Okay, for example number 1. A manufacturer claimed that the average life of batteries used in their electronic games is 150 hours. It is known that the standard deviation of this type of battery is 20 hours. So a consumer wished to test the manufacturer's claim and accordingly tested 100 electronic games using the battery. It was found out that the mean is equal to 144 hours. Identify the appropriate test statistic to be used. So una, so kanina, di ba yung activity natin, kung balikan natin, na dinetermine muna natin yung mga given data. Kasi mula doon, malalaman natin kung C-test or T-test ang gagamitin natin. So from the problem, dito, given ang, so ano ba yung sample size natin? Greater than or equal to 30 or less than to 30? So, saan dyan? Paano natin malalaman yon? So, a consumer is to test 100 electronic games. So ibig sabihin yung sample size natin ay greater than or equal to 30. So, and then, ang population standard deviation ba natin ay given or hindi? So, tingnan natin. Since tested 100, it was found the mean, identify, so, okay, nandito siya sa second, sa pangalawang sentence natin. It is known that the standard deviations type is battery of 20 hours. So, therefore, yung population standard deviation natin is known. So hindi yan sample standard deviation. So, population standard deviation. Since yung sample size natin ay greater than or equal to 30, and then yung population standard deviation natin is known, so therefore, anong test ang gagamitin natin? C-test. Okay? C-test ang gagamitin natin. So, next. An English teacher wanted to test whether the mean reading speed of students is 550 words per minute. A sample of 12 students revealed a sample mean of 540 words per minute with a standard deviation of 5 words per minute. At alpha level of 0.05, is the reading speed different from 550 words per minute? So, based on the problem, so ano yung mga given natin? So, ano yung sample size natin? So, ang sample size natin is 12. So, yan ay less than 30. And then, we revealed the sample mean of 500 words per minute with a standard deviation of 5 words. So, yung standard deviation of 5 words per minute dito, yan ay sample standard deviation. Tama? Ito ay sample standard deviation. So, ibig sabihin, yung population standard deviation natin ay hindi siya given. So, saan natin i-check? Dito. Okay? So, the population standard deviation is not known. So, therefore, what test statistic ang gagamitin natin? T-test. Kasi yung N natin is less than 30 and then the population standard deviation is not known. Ang given dito ay sample standard deviation yan. Sample standard deviation to. So, ibig sabihin, yung population standard deviation natin is not known. Therefore, t-test ang gagamitin. Next. A study was conducted to look at the average time students exercise. A researcher claimed that in average, students exercise less than 15 hours per month. In a random sample size, n is equal to 115, it was found that the mean time students exercise is the sample mean is 11.3 hours per month with a sample standard deviation of 6.43 hours per month. So, in example number 3 class, what will be the sample size? So, yung sample size natin is 115. Okay? So, ibig sabihin greater than or equal to 30. Napaka nung sample size natin, no? Sobrang laki. So, extremely large yan. And then, yung population standard deviation ba natin is given? Okay? Given ba yung population standard deviation natin? So, balikan natin yung problem. Claim that so ito ay population mean, sample mean. So, wala. So, hindi siya given. So, therefore, the population standard deviation is not known. So, kapag ganito class, if your n is greater than or equal to 30 and your population standard deviation is not known, so anong pinaka-appropriate tool na gagamitin natin? C-test pa rin, no? C-test pa rin using the, according to the central limit theorem, no? Kapag malaki yung sample size and then the population variance or the population standard deviation is not known, so ang gagamitin natin is C-test or the standard normal distribution. Next. Okay, for example, number 4, it is claimed that the average age of working student is a certain university is 35. Researchers selected a random sample of 25 working students. So the computation of their ages resulted to an average of 32 years with standard deviation of 10 years. So what do you think? No? Ang sample size natin is 25. So yung n natin is less than 30. And then, given ba yung population standard deviation? So, walang binigay dun sa first sentence natin. So, therefore, ang given dito is sample standard deviation. So, sample standard deviation. Therefore, the population standard deviation is not known. So, anong test ang gagamitin natin kapag ang n is less than 30 and then your population standard deviation is not known? So, what test? Okay, t-test. Okay, number 5. A manufacturer of tires claim that their tire has a mean life of at least 50,000 kilometers. A random sample of 28 of these tires is tested at the sample mean is 33,000. No? Assume that the population standard deviation is 3,000 and the lives of the tires are approximately normally distributed. So, what is the sample size? So, nakita-kita naman dito a random sample of 28. Okay, so, ibig sabihin less than 30. So, yung n natin is less than 30. And then, the population standard deviation. So, since this is the population mean, 50,000 kilometer per second. So, dito naman, tested. So, ito yung sample mean natin. Ito yung population mean. Assume that the population standard deviation is 3,000 kilometer per second. So, ibig sabihin, yung population standard deviation natin dito ay given. So, is known. So, since yung n natin is less than 30, but the population standard deviation is known, so anong test yung gagamitin natin sa ganitong case? C-test, no? Kanina, diniscuss ko yung summary, di ba? So, kapag yung n is less than 30 and the population standard deviation is known, ang gagamitin natin is C-test. Okay? So, I hope na naintindihan kung paano natin identify kung ano yung appropriate tool para kung ano yung gamitin natin, no, sa test statistic, kung C-test or T-test. Okay, test yourself. So, pwede nyo itong sagutan. Okay. So, bibigyan ko lang kayo ng 10 seconds or pwede i-post nyo muna yung video sa kanya sagutan. Sa kanya i-play para makita nyo yung kung tama yung sagot nyo. Okay, for number 1, the answer is. For number 2, for number 3. Okay, for number 4 and for number 5. So I hope you get a perfect score, 5 out of 5. So if you get a perfect score, congratulations. So you may share your score sa comment section ng video tutorial na to.
Thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned something. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button para updated kayo for more video tutorial. This is your guide in learning your math lesson, your Wow Math channel.